Okay, so today we're going to continue this conversation on the life and the afterlife. And I want to talk about a couple of different things. It may be a bit abstract today, but hopefully over the course of the next 45 minutes, we'll be able to kind of unpack and understand. The mind, the intellect, the brain, knowledge. The mind creates distinctions. No matter how profound an understanding of the soul is, when that understanding is articulated, let's say in the language of philosophy or in the language, in any type of language, there's going to be duality and separateness. It's not going to be essence. It's not going to be one. The moment you have an understanding, there's duality. I'm going to explain this for you. The Kabbalists actually take us a bit beyond this particular paradigm. So if you take a look at philosophy, philosophers who speak of the soul as a superior intelligence that's created by its creator and it possesses an existence of its own, separated from its source. The mystics view the soul as part of the divine, that it's a direct emanation from the emanator. So philosophers will talk about a separate existence. Mystics, Kabbalists will talk about a direct connection. The soul is part of the divine and never separated. So the idea, the biblical idea that we're created in the image of God, that we're created in the divine image, is not simply seen as an abstract or an illusion. It's not a metaphor. But according to Kabbalah, we take this literally. We are created in the image of the Creator. We are created in the image of God. That deep within our heart, there's a spark of the infinite, an aspect of the personality of the infinite, of the personality of God, that is not part of creation, but it's an actual part of the Creator. This spark is divine property. You know, people wear shirts that says property of. There's a spark within us that's property of the Creator. Continuously. And this divine property links a finite human to the awesome power of the infinite. We have within us the infinite. We, meaning the soul as it's connected to the body, is limited. It's limited because of the limitations of the body. But we also have within us something that's not limited. We have within us a spark of the Creator. And it's not that the Creator created it and you have, the inspiration. For example, like a carpenter that carves a table. So you have the inspiration of the carpenter, or a designer that designs a room. So you can walk into a room and you have the inspiration of the room. No, constantly, there is still the Creator within the creation. We cannot separate ourselves from the Creator. There is a piece of the Creator within us. Now, the intellectual element of the soul has the ability to lead us to the door and point us in the right direction, so to speak. So the divine soul actually takes us through the door. With the rational soul, I'm just using these concepts because I know that you know them already. I don't have to explain them. So the divine soul takes us through the door, and the rational soul, we can contemplate and ponder and even understand the oneness of the Creator. But it's only with the divine soul that we're actually able to open that door and walk through it. So, as to actually experience and sense the incredible truth of infinite oneness, that takes a divine soul. So ideally, we want to use that infinite potential, which is a piece of God, a piece of the Creator. We use that Creator to guide our lives. And we use our rational soul once we've gotten or made that choice, or in this metaphor, gotten into the room to understand what we've done and the choice that we made. Where so often it's the opposite way around. And that's what's so beautiful. I always think about that statement the Jewish people said when they accepted the Torah. When the Torah describes the scene at Sinai, when God offered the Torah, the response that the Jewish people gave to the Torah was Na'aseh v'nishma. We will do, and then we'll ask questions later. That is what, according to Kabbalah, the way that we want to guide our lives. Let the infinite potential within us, let the divine soul within us guide us, and then ask questions later. Don't be a philosopher before the job is done. So often, well, I don't know, I don't believe. I've told you the story before, but I think about this as a good metaphor. I was once approached someone. I was a teenager, and I was walking around a park, and I was asking Jewish men if they wanted to put on tefillin, and I approached this man, and I asked him, "Are you Jewish?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Would you like to put on tefillin?" And he said, "Look in my hand. I have a ham sandwich." To which I smiled and said, "But the ham sandwich is in your right hand, and tefillin goes in the left hand." Guiding by the principles of our godly soul has nothing to do with what's in the right hand. You don't have to understand. Maybe one day you will understand. Maybe the second after you do it, you understand. But you don't have to understand in order to do a mitzvah. You don't have to understand in order to allow your divine soul, the piece of the infinite, the piece of the Creator, to guide your moves and your motives. You allow the infinite to guide, and then eventually, whether it's today, tomorrow, or 50 years from now, eventually, or maybe even never, but it could be that you will understand it. But one has nothing to do with the other.
Rabbi, can I ask a question here?
Please.
So that statement of like, do now, ask questions later, it just feels really cultish to me. So how do we, because we are human and we have a lot of influences, and our environment and our upbringing and the confusion in some of us can be really strong. And so in order to do before we kind of know, doesn't there have to be some place that we feel it? I mean, we call it gut or heart or wherever, that like, this is what I should be doing. I mean, some of the mitzvahs very common sense, of course, the right from wrong. But I mean, I think of experiences, that I've seen or read about, that it gets people in trouble because we don't have that. We're not sure what path we're supposed to be on because we don't have that connection or that little aha inside. You know what I'm asking?
I think it's a very important question. And I think so often about the various influences in our life and how they play roles into the way that we do and behave and experience. And there's always going to be that lingering question. Today, there's a lot of trust but verify type of conversation. So give me an example. Like you said, and I think the example of things that are common sense is common sense. Give me an example that you can think of a mitzvah that's not common sense that you would think, and I'm going to use your example, that if you didn't understand it before you did it, it would feel cultish. I just need an example.
Oh, I'd have to know the mitzvahs better than that to give you an example.
Could I throw out an example?
Sure, please.
The assumption that Jews are the chosen souls.
That's not a mitzvah. That we can debate. That's not a mitzvah. But that's a good example. That's a good example of, you don't have to accept that. We can discuss it. We can have many discussions on that. But what we're talking about is specifically a mitzvah.
So Shabbat.
Shabbat.
I was just going to say the same thing, keeping Shabbat.
Yeah, Shabbat is a good example. It's not necessarily do not murder or do not steal. Shabbat is a mitzvah that we do to because it's considered what's called an edut. It's a testimonial commandment. God created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh. When we rest on the seventh, we're like God, and we are testimony to God's existence. That was explaining Shabbat in less than 30 seconds. There's a lot more to it, but there's so many nuances to Shabbat. Now, it's really, really hard to know everything before you start. Yet, if anyone has ever experienced Shabbat, right away they'll tell you that the difference was, let's say, in our 2022 brains, that I put away my phone for 25 hours. I put away my technology for 25 hours. All of a sudden, once you experience it, you can already see that there's a particular value. And again, and I think that Shabbat is a good example because the point of it is not to find the value in the experience, but rather you're experiencing this direct connection with the Creator. You're literally mimicking the Creator. So you're really exposing that part of the Creator that's within you by mimicking the Creator. Now, we can debate all the nuances of Shabbat from today till tomorrow, but it's not going to change that experience. That experience can only be truly appreciated when experienced. It's kind of like swimming. So I don't consider someone who jumps in the pool without knowing how to swim. I'm not saying go jump in the deep end, but you jump in the shallow end, not jump, but walk into the shallow end without knowing how to swim, and then start the process of swimming, experience what it's like being in the pool. I can stand you on the side of the pool and we can talk and philosophize about swimming from today till tomorrow. But I don't consider the person who walked into the shallow end of the pool feeding into the Kool-Aid of the cold. Is that fair?
I think it's fair. I understand that. And I mean, if we live in the world of action, I think that's not a debatable, personally, idea. And so I understand the doing. But I gotta say, I'm with the Jill, just because of my background. It's hard to turn off the intellectual side and not ask questions and just blindly observe sometimes when things don't feel
So let me
natural.
clarify.
Okay.
Nobody has to blindly observe. You can even ask questions while you're observing. What I'm saying is that ask questions while observing instead of ask question, then observe. Nobody asks for blind faith.
Thank you. I like how you put that. That clicked.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
That clicked.
Which means, going back to the pool, why should I sit here explaining to you how to swim, jump into the pool, walk into the pool, and then let's go over different processes of how to swim, but you're already in the pool. Whereas you say, no. Until I understand every nuance and process of swimming, I'm not walking into the pool. And what's interesting about the metaphor of the pool is that there's some people who can have trauma attached to water. And so it's hard. So yes, and I think that to a certain extent, there is a lot of trauma and there is a lot of extreme. We live in a world of extremes. And I think it's important that we remember that Judaism, mitzvah, Kabbalah does not live in a world of extremes. It lives in a world of nuance. So what we're asking is not blind faith. What we're asking is, let the divine soul guide you. And once you've opened the door, I didn't say once you've been in the room for 10 years. Once you've opened the door and put your first foot through the door, then start asking questions. And believe me, we know how to ask questions. And we will never stop. And one of the most fundamental and most important elements of Judaism is asking questions, right? The Passover Seder is supposed to be an example of a typical dinner in a Jewish home. And the first thing we do is we turn to the children and say, ask questions. It's fundamental. We teach our children from the time they're very young, ask. But there's a caveat here. Don't let your question stop your experience. Experience, and the moment while you're experiencing it, ask the questions. Walk through the door. It takes a little bit of faith. Walk through the door. But the moment you get your first foot in that door, ask away. Don't ask the questions before you go to the Passover Seder, which means what we said is come to the Seder, and while you're experiencing the Seder, ask the questions. But the child who's going to say, I don't know about this Egypt thing. I don't know about this Passover thing. I don't know about this whole thing. I don't think I'm going to join you because I have too many questions. What we say to that child is, you're missing the experience. And your desire for answers, it's not even desire for answers. Your desire for knowledge and your fear of getting, quote unquote, sucked into it is blocking you from experiencing. And then you miss the point. Sit at the Seder, experience Passover, and while you're sitting there and while you're experiencing, ask as many questions as you want. Does this clarify your question, Jill?
Yes, yeah, it's helpful. The analogy of like going into the shallow end is helpful. So that man with the ham sandwich, did he ever wrap the tefillin?
He did.
That's interesting. I like that too. The ham sandwich in right hand, tefillin in the left. Oh.
And it doesn't stop. You see, that's the point. Because what we're talking about is connecting to the godly soul and letting the godly soul guide us. The ham sandwich is a different conversation for a different time. Right. It doesn't stop allowing that connection with the godly soul to experience.
We don't have to be perfect before we enter into these experiences.
Exactly. And you don't have to go confess about all the other things you didn't do before entering into those experiences.
Oh, how, even as a Jew in a Christian society, that's so ingrained, even though I've never been to confession, it's just that whole, got to clear all of this up.
Right. And also
Totally.
because we are so ingrained in this Christian society, we become so used to, well, I don't do that right and I don't do that right. Why should I bother doing that?
Oh,
yeah. I relate to that. I relate to that very much. And the question that's been going around in my brain a lot lately is who I am, Celeste, my being totally authentically myself. Can I still fit in to this community and still be the imperfect me that I am without dropping, like big chunks of myself
right
along the way?
Right. And no one asked you to not be Celeste. No one asked you to not
True.
take your life experience and what's beautiful about is that you can now bring your life experience. You can bring all of the elements and the facets of your being into the experience.
Very true. The only person I think that's ever limited me in this journey is me. No one else has.
Exactly what I was thinking, that we ask ourselves not to be ourselves.
That's why we need to remember that the day we were born is the day when God decided that the world needed us as we are.
Exactly.
So
and that's what we have to continue to tell our children even after their bat mitzvah.
I will keep telling her.
You matter. You matter.
Do you, be you.
But it's such an important, it seems so obvious, but it's not obvious. There's this intrinsic idea that's, I don't know when it started, but in our society that we don't matter. But we matter, each of us.
Where do you see that we don't matter? Sorry, I
don't know. One of the issues that I see so often that people have are these low self-esteems, that people don't feel, for whatever reason, they don't feel like they matter. I see it so often. Maybe not in this group, but I do see this often. There's this intrinsic idea, the same way that people feel like they have to confess about everything before they do anything. People feel like they don't matter. Our synagogue is right next door to the most popular Chinese restaurant in Montreal. Just to understand that it's so popular in the Jewish community, the Chinese restaurant closes 2 nights a year, Yom Kippur and the first night of Passover. And the owner, who's a wonderful man, I've gotten to know him very well, our neighbor, he said that over 90% of his clientele is Jewish. And when I wanted to do a kosher evening with him, I thought it'd be really fun to bring, to do like the Chinese place goes kosher for a night. Obviously, we couldn't use his kitchen, but we would we bring all the chefs to our synagogue kitchen and we do an evening. And he refused to make the egg rolls without the pork. He's like, no way. It's not going to taste the same. There's no way. There's no way possible. It's a chicken. No, no, no. Impossible beef. Nope.
They wouldn't last in Boulder.
And yeah, exactly. And so I often will be standing outside the synagogue, just talking to someone or on the phone because I want to get some air. And someone will walk over to me and start apologizing. And the first time it happened, I didn't know what they were saying. And then it took me like 2 or 3 minutes to compute that they're actually apologizing for going into the non-kosher Chinese restaurant next door. But it still happens on a regular basis. People will be getting out of their car, see me standing there. I wonder if there's ever people who park their car, look at me standing there, and don't go into the Chinese restaurant because I'm standing there. I don't know. I can't tell you that story, but I can tell you on a regular basis, people will walk over to me. I didn't look at them. I was minding my own business. I don't even know them. And they will be apologizing, confessing to me before they go into the Chinese restaurant, or have the egg rolls in their hands apologizing. I have nothing to do with it. It's between you and God. Don't get me involved.
You should make a roll-up poster with you and the owner of the restaurant shaking hands, so you can relieve people's consciences.
Oh, I wanted to do a pop-up confessional outside the restaurant. But it's so not Jewish. But it's amazing, this idea that we have in our minds. And yes, obviously, I'm saying this a bit tongue-in-cheek, but it's true that it's amazing how much we're influenced, and that's not our way. I'm not necessarily condoning that people are going and eating pork-filled egg rolls in a Chinese restaurant, but that's between you and God. And it doesn't exclude you from any other mitzvah. And that is the story and the narrative that we're talking about here. That's the guiding narrative, is that if you allow the godly soul to guide, yes, we are human beings. Yes, we're not perfect, but nobody asked us to be perfect. And definitely we don't have to be perfect before doing a mitzvah. Julianne, actually, since you made that comment, I'll tell you, the issue has nothing to do with the Chinese restaurant in Smogain on Yom Kippur, because the Chinese restaurant is closed on Yom Kippur. Well, the issue is the other side of the synagogue is a croissant bakery. And so every single Saturday morning, or even Yom Kippur, when you're walking into the synagogue, all you smell is butter. That's much harder for Yom Kippur than the Chinese food. I mean, we're sandwiched in between this really nice French pastry shop and the Chinese restaurant. In the French pastry shop, every morning it smells, you just smell the butter. I mean, it's all over the place. What can you do? Definitely can't win. So we have.
Rabbi, I think Fami's had his hand up for a really long time.
I apologize. I didn't even see it. Fami.
Yeah, I saw it. So I don't know. I thought I'd tell you.
Thank you. Rabbi, I have a question. What's the difference between what you said and being tam in Yiddish?
I'm being what?
Tam.
A tam?
Tam. T-A-M. Yes.
Tam means two things. It could either mean a simple person, who doesn't ask questions, or it could be taste. Tam also means taste in Hebrew.
I'm saying about the first one. Being tam. Not I mean.
You're saying
follow...
the third. We call this the third son at the Passover Seder. The tam.
No, I'm saying being innocent. Not follow.
Somebody who follows. So and I'll go back to the Passover Seder to use this distinction. We create a distinction of 4 sons. The wise, I don't like the term, the Rasha, which is not the wicked necessarily, we'll call the person the chilled out or the one who's apathetic. The Tom, which is what we call the simple, and then the one that doesn't know what to ask. The point is that they're all sitting at the Seder. You understand? So what we're not talking about is a Jewish experience. We're talking about an individual's experience, but they all have one thing in common. They're sitting at the Seder. Whether or not they're apathetic or they have wisdom or they don't know the questions to ask, it doesn't matter. Because they're all experiencing. So there are some people, and we have to be careful with those people, and I approach that, and knowing good and well that there are people who are somewhat, trying to find the right word, are easier to influence without asking questions. We'll call them the Toms of the world. We have to be careful with that because that's the nature of a human being where they have more blind faith. Judaism is not about blind faith. Blind faith means you do it and you never ask questions. Or you do it and you're not allowed to ask questions. Judaism is you do it and while you're doing it, ask. But don't preclude yourself from doing it because you didn't ask all the questions you wanted to ask. Fama, you understand?
I understand, but I mean, I think being tam, it makes your life, I mean, it have its own virtue. It's like it makes your life easier.
Oh, there's no question. There's no question it makes your life easier. I'll tell you, every personality is different. I could never be a person who just did things and never asked. So I know I could never, that's not my personality. So I know I've met people who that's their personality and I'm happy for them. And they have different challenges, probably not the challenge of trying to navigate a world and like Jill, your antenna's going up and saying, Kool-Aid, Kool-Aid, cult. Some people are good with that. I can't relate to it. So you'd have to ask someone who can relate to that.
But sometimes the answer will take time to come. You cannot see it right away. Sometimes the answer will, I mean, you will understand the facts after.
And what you're saying is 100% right. Nobody said that you're going to get answers. Because answers, we can't control. We're just saying ask the questions.
No, yeah. I mean.
Right?
Yeah.
So nobody said that nobody, answers don't always, you're right, it takes years to come. So there are answers we'll never get. There are answers that we ask ourselves every single day and we never get answers for. In our entire life, we'll never get answers because we're limited to time and space. And there's no way to answer this question within the confines of time and space.
Yeah.
But it doesn't stop us from asking it.
Yeah, so 100%.
And asking it every day.
Thank you.
And I would hate if Judaism took away my inquisitive nature and my ability to ask questions, even if I'm not getting answers.
Because some people get stuck there. I mean, you can ask questions, but yeah,
you ask it while you're at the Seder. You don't ask it instead of going to the Seder.
Yeah. 100%, you're right, 100%.
Cheryl, please.
Cheryl, you're muted. Cheryl, you're muted.
Thank you. I was thinking of the example, not in Judaism, but just as you said, the not knowing, Fahmy, Tom. I'm thinking before, in the US, before politics became crazy in the Trump era, I really was not into politics at all. I didn't know who was Secretary of State or who was, you know, in leadership roles. And then all of a sudden, it's in my face. It's absolutely in my face. I was happier not knowing all this nonsense and crazy that was going on. So to your point, Fami, sometimes, but then who was it, Jill? No, it was Alessandra who said, well, simple isn't the point. And it was like, now I'm obsessed with it. And now that's just another thing that makes me mashuggy is the politics of what's going on in this country. My country, not your country. So I would have rather been the simple person, I guess. That was my point. No,
but that's
biggie.
not the way God made you.
I know.
And that's my point, is that there are some people who that's the way God made them. And I guess they have other challenges. So what are we taking away today? Alessandra, why don't you start? What are you taking out of this today?
It's difficult to unmute yourself. I like that we have the truth inside us. And, you know, it opens the door to the path. But still, we need to want to connect to the truth. So I think that's what people call soul searching, you know, trying to find yourself in different terminologies. But I like that we have the ability to connect to the truth, and it's a matter of action, wanting to do it. So that's what I take from today's conversation. And I will pass it on to Jen.
Thank you. And thank you to Jill for asking your question, because I was struggling with that same concept, and that really helped a lot to have that discussion. I think the takeaway for today is you don't have to be perfect, which is something I need to write down and put in big letters across the top of my wall. But I'll pass to Cheryl.
Thanks, Jen. I wrote down something that I guess I struggled with, where you said we all have an infinite spark of the creator, but it's not part of creation. So I know it's unique to us. How do we necessarily find what that little spark is? And is that spark our gut intuition that is that guide? And all of us have different intuitions as to how to move forward. I struggled with the part that it's not part of creation. Because if God made us, you kind of defined we're part of the creator, not the creation. I don't know. It's just a word thing. Go ahead. You can respond if you would like. Maybe
I'm going to respond only, which I generally don't like to respond during this time.
Oh,
but I'm going to respond because it's such an important element. It's such a key component of what we spoke about today. And that is that there's a part of you that is beyond creation. Creation is limiting. This is the unlimited part of us, is the part of us that is part of the creator, which means it's not limited by creation.
Is this the Homer part?
Yes.
Okay.
No, it's not the Homer part. It's the opposite. It's the Surah part.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I got it wrong. The Surah
okay.
part. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
You can pass it
I'll
on.
pass it to Jill. Yeah.
Thank you. So much to think about as usual. But I loved your analogy of kind of going into the shallow end. And so for me, believing that I have this godly soul inside of me, even if I don't have this overwhelming evidence that that's the case, but believing it and then acting as if, even in all of my mistakes and challenges, with the hope, and I think I've actually been able to experience a little bit of just these little experiences or inclinations that, oh yeah, that is something I can really feel, because I don't think it's something I can, I can't make sense of it with my head and my mind. So it's got to be some kind of whole body, like Cheryl, like I don't know where I would feel it, but I kind of know it when I've felt it in the past for those brief seconds. So, you were saying before that we may never know the answer. I'm not sure if I wasn't getting any kind of hit someplace that I could keep going, keep asking the questions without, turning off and searching on another path. But somehow I'm believing it, at least right now, and I'm going to go with it. So I'm going to pass it on to Chava.
Thanks, Jill. The intellect, when our rational soul is in play, there's always duality. That's something that I'm going to be thinking about for a bit, in terms of within that duality and using my rational mind, what kind of control do I have to not let the duality beat me up and drag me in one way or the other, to just be more centered within that duality, and maybe that will silence some of the noise up here. Alana, are you ready?
I really don't have anything to add, so I'm just going to pass to Fahmi.
Thank you. So I want to maybe develop a little bit what when I said Tam. So sometimes you ask questions, that's 100%, but sometimes you have to take decisions. So what do? Something you don't know. You don't know the answer, and maybe the answer will be given to you in years, or it will never come, as you said, Rabbi. So in that context, I think being Tam and trusting God and putting like the way of the Torah and the mitzvot, and taking the action in according to these principles, it's a good way. It's what we should do. That's what I meant by being Tam. It's not just because sometimes, yes, you have to, but sometimes you have to take a decision. What do you do? You will wait like for 10 years, or sometimes it will never come the answer. You can ask questions, of course, but sometimes you have to do A or B or C or D. So that's in this is myself. In this case, when I'm faced in these situations, I think being Tam and trusting God and letting the godly soul speaks is our best guess.
Yeah, I'm going to read Julian's reflection, and then I want to give you a little reflection myself. Julian says, God limited, as it were, himself in order to create, so we're part of that infinite oneness beyond everything else. But God has no parts, so in a sense, we're all one. It depends on how we look at it. What perspective or level, I suppose. Maybe creation is the illusion of parts, divisions, and separation. I want to kind of clarify a bit of what Fahmi said and use Chava and Jill's reflections for that. So what Chava said was a very powerful idea, is that the duality, the separateness happens when we're guiding ourselves based on the rational soul, not when we're guiding ourselves based on the divine soul. That's where the questions are. So if someone is the Tam, like you're saying, Fahmi, someone is not asking questions in the world of the rational soul, that's going to be very confusing. what we do is there is a clarity. There is and Jill, what Jill said also kind of clarifies that, yes, it's true. You're going to get answers or little, I don't say call them answers. They're little commercials, little guiding, little previews, little moments, little ideas. And they will guide you, but those are coming from the godly soul. And so when we have to make that decision, what Kabbalah is asking us to do is to make the decision from the godly soul, and then the rational soul can debate it once it's done. Because if we make the decision based on the rational soul, and we can all relate to this, because myself, and I can imagine everyone else here, has had these moments where you make decisions and you're not sure, and you have what do they call buyer's remorse. That is decisions based on the rational soul. When you make the choice, when you enter the room, you have to know that it's the godly soul that guided that. Once you're there, you can start asking the questions. But if you're going to start making decisions based on the rational soul, there's always going to be the duality. There's always going to be confusion. And that's not what we want. We want to be able to teach ourselves to make decisions that exist above the duality. It's interesting that Julian is using the example of Abraham sacrificing Isaac. I don't want to use that example. It's a whole conversation all on its own, because that is a very difficult. I always say that, when it talks about biblical figures, and this is a different conversation, but I relate much more to the Josephs than the Abrahams. I don't understand how somebody can, I don't understand that question. I mean, but yes, you're right, that the rational soul would have questioned him along. And obviously, his divine soul was a very different type of divine soul than maybe my divine soul that's been tainted by cult-like experiences and people who decide to use God in the name of extreme things. And I can't get that out of my who I am. And I think that many people living in this society can't get it out of who they are. So it's hard today to relate to the Abraham, to know that there are moments when you have to sacrifice Isaac because God said without questioning. I don't know. I can't get into that. That's too much for me. But I can relate to the Joseph who has to make really hard decisions in a very real world. Guides those decisions based on his godly soul, and then afterwards can look back and say, you see, it was God's plan. Turn to his brothers and say, God brought me here so that I can save you and the world. But he's saying that after a life of difficult decisions and having to deal with the ramifications of those decisions, and perhaps having to be punished in this world for some of them, like sitting in jail. So that, I think Joseph is much more an example of who we are and what we are. In any case, we're already over time today, but it's an interesting, all these are very interesting perspectives. And I hope that at least we were able to get this idea clear about the duality of the rational soul and the godly soul guiding the choices we make and then asking questions after. Those were the two main ideas I wanted to bring out today, and I hope that those were clear at least.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a good day, everybody.
Have a good day. For those of you who are staying for Talmud,
Thank you.
Talmud in 2 minutes.
Bye, everybody.
Can I just say two quick things?
Yes.
Thank you. But firstly, I super appreciate you recording it because I came late. I'm really sorry. The second one is I don't know if you saw my Tom question or my Tom Thumb question, but I ended up wondering if Thomas might be a Hebrew name because it sounds very like.
That's very funny. Not that I know of, but I could see how you could try to think of it that way, but not that I know of.
Thank you.
Okay, let's start. Talmud.
Thank you very much.
Have a good day.
You have a good day, Yarba. Thank you.